Welcome back. This is day 2 of your endocrine system. So today's aim is how does the pancreas regulate our blood sugar levels? Okay, but before we get into that, you guys have got 2 do not questions. So go ahead and pause this video. And as always, answer those questions. Press play when you're ready to review them. All right, number 1, why is it important for our body to maintain homeostasis of glucose, and what disease would result if we didn't? Well, for the first part, it's always important that our body maintains homeostasis because our body functions best at a stable internal environment. Okay, but what disease would result if we didn't? That disease is called diabetes. And we're going to be talking about diabetes today, what it is, how it functions, and how it hurts you. And number 2, what organ and hormone regulate glucose levels in our blood? That is the job of the pancreas, which secretes or releases 2 hormones called insulin and glucagon. Okay, so let's get to it. Before we read today's passage, you guys have got a review question, okay? Now, for this review, I want you to just stop and write down anything you know about the endocrine system. So tell me what hormones and glands are involved and how do these chemical messengers communicate? I'm not actually going to give you the answer to this because I want you guys to flip back to yesterday's notes and tell me anything and everything you know about the endocrine system. When you're done with that, I'll be waiting for you. All right, guys, so today we're going to be reading a passage about what is diabetes, how is it caused, how does it work, how do the 2 hormones of the pancreas work? We're going to learn all of that. So I've divided this passage up into sections, and after each paragraph, there's going to be 1 or 2 questions about what you just read. So it's important that as we go along, we're going to annotate. We're going to highlight any important phrases or words that will help us answer those questions. So let's get to it. All right, the hormone-producing portion of the pancreas consists of clusters of cells that resemble islands. These clusters of cells are called islets of Langerhans. Each islet includes beta cells, which secrete a hormone called insulin, and alpha cells, which secrete another hormone called glucagon. Insulin and glucagon help to keep the level of glucose in the blood stable. Insulin stimulates cells in the liver and muscles to remove sugar from the blood and store it as glycogen or fat. Glucagon stimulates the liver to break down glycogen and release glucose back into the blood. It also stimulates the release of fatty acids from stored fats. So question 1, what is the function of the pancreas as it pertains to the endocrine system? Well, we need to know that the pancreas produces 2 hormones, insulin and glucagon. And these 2 hormones work together to keep the level of glucose or sugar in the blood stable. Okay. But moving on, what exactly is insulin? Well, when blood glucose levels rise after eating, the pancreas is going to release insulin. Insulin stimulates cells throughout the body to take glucose out of the bloodstream. This glucose taken out of circulation is stored as glycogen in the liver and skeletal muscles. In fat tissue, glucose molecules are converted to lipids. Insulin prevents the levels of glucose in the blood from rising too rapidly and ensures that excess glucose is stored for future use. So now tell me, what does insulin do? Well, we need to know that insulin is going to stimulate cells to take glucose out of the bloodstream. So overall, this hormone works to lower or decrease your blood sugar levels. Okay. But now, what about glucagon? Within 1 or 2 hours after eating, when the level of blood glucose drops, glucagon is released from the pancreas. Glucagon stimulates the cells of the liver and the skeletal muscles to break down glycogen and increase glucose levels in the blood. Glucagon also causes fat cells to break down fat so that they can be used for the production of carbohydrates. These actions make more chemical energy available for the body and help raise the blood glucose level back to normal. So now tell me, what does glucagon do? Well, glucagon does the opposite of insulin. Glucagon is going to stimulate cells to break down glycogen, which in turn increases glucose or sugar levels in the blood. So overall, glucagon helps raise or increase your blood sugar. Okay. Now, this is where things get dicey. When the pancreas fails to produce or properly use insulin, a condition known as diabetes mellitus occurs. In diabetes mellitus, the amount of glucose in the blood may rise so high that the kids actually excrete glucose in the urine. very high blood glucose levels can damage almost every cell in your body. So I actually love this comment about the kidneys actually excrete glucose in the urine, because one of the easiest and fastest ways to tell if you have diabetes is if your pee starts smelling sweet. If your urine smells sweet, you might want to go get tested for diabetes, because that means your body is not regulating the amount of glucose in your blood and is actually excreting that extra glucose in your urine. So what exactly is diabetes? Well, diabetes is a disease that results when your pancreas fails to produce or properly use insulin. And with this disease, your body is unable to regulate blood sugar levels. Okay. Now we're going to learn a little bit more about the two different types of diabetes now. So there are two types of diabetes mellitus. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder, and it usually develops in people before the age of 15. Okay. In this type of diabetes, there is little or no secretion of insulin. People with this type of diabetes must follow a strict diet and get daily injections of insulin to keep their blood glucose levels under control. But the second type of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, most commonly develops in people after the age of 40. People with type 2 diabetes produce low to normal amounts of insulin. However, their cells are unable to properly respond to the hormone because of the interaction of the insulin receptors and the insulin. Hold on, I've fallen behind on my annotations. Right, cells aren't able to properly respond to the hormone because of the interaction of the receptors. Okay. In its early stages, type 2 diabetes can often be controlled through diet and exercise. A diet high in complex carbohydrates and low in saturated fat and sugar can prevent blood sugar fluctuations. Unfortunately, many people with type 2 diabetes eventually require medication as well. If the body stops producing insulin, the person will also need to have daily insulin injections. So now tell me, what is the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes? Well, for type 1 diabetes, this is an autoimmune disorder, and it develops early in life. And with this type 1 diabetes, the pancreas produces too little or no insulin at all. But type 2 diabetes is a little bit different. This is going to develop later in life as a result of your lifestyle choices. And in this type of diabetes, your pancreas produces low or normal amounts of insulin, but your cells don't respond to that hormone because of issues with your receptors. Now, both of my parents actually have type 2 diabetes. And I'll highlight this last sentence right here. Unfortunately, many people with type 2 diabetes require medication as well. They both take a medication called metformin that helps control their diabetes. Okay, if you have any family members or friends who have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, check in with them, see what they do to keep their diabetes under control. Which leads us to number 6. Can you cure diabetes? What can you do? No, unfortunately, there is no cure. We can only work to control the symptoms. Okay, if you have diabetes, you're most likely going to follow a strict diet or exercise regimen, monitor your blood sugar levels, and take medication to keep your blood sugar levels as stable as possible. Now, one thing I will highlight, if you have any family members or friends with type 2 diabetes, it is super important that they follow that recommended diet and exercise regimen, because unfortunately with diabetes, it can lead to a lot of other health problems. So diabetes can cause you to have high blood pressure, which is going to cause nerve damage and damage with circulation. In fact, my mom maybe didn't take care of her diabetes as well as she should have, and actually just had surgery on her eyes because she ended up having something called diabetic retinopathy, which means that the blood vessels in her eyes actually burst. And so she had blood in her eyes and had to have surgery to get that blood removed and to seal up those blood vessels. But that is the result of her diabetes that has caused lots of issues down the road. So if you know that this runs in your family, like me, okay, it's super important that you eat well and exercise to put this off as long as possible or prevent yourself from ending up on this journey, because it is not fun, let me tell you. All right. But my mom's okay. I don't know if I mentioned that. She's fine. Okay. Now, the regulation of blood sugar is an example of something called a feedback loop. Okay, we mentioned this in class a few weeks ago, and I gave you guys the example of whenever you turn in lab reports, I usually leave feedback on that. And with that feedback, I tell you what you're doing well and then what you need to change and do better. And that same exact process happens in your body. So one example of how this works is when your blood glucose levels rise. When your blood sugar gets too high, your pancreas is going to notice that and it's going to release insulin. Okay, and in response to that insulin, the cells of your body are then going to take up glucose, take glucose out of the blood, and the liver is going to start converting that glucose to glycogen to store it for later. Okay, and because of that, your blood glucose levels fall. Let me highlight that. Cells take up glucose. Okay, but then if your blood sugar levels get too low, the pancreas is going to notice that as well and is going to release that other hormone, glucagon. And glucagon's job is to raise blood sugar levels. So in response to glucagon, the liver is going to break down glycogen and release glucose into the blood. And because of that, blood glucose levels are going to rise. And this is a never-ending process. This cycle is constantly happening in your body, where when your blood sugar rises, your body releases insulin to lower it. But then when it gets too low, your body releases glucagon to raise it back up. So overall, these two hormones are going to work together to maintain our favorite word, homeostasis. It helps keep things stable in your body and make sure that you are as healthy and happy as you can possibly be. So now, using that information, I want you guys to answer your exit ticket questions. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow.